You can all take our seats. It's an amazing story, isn't it? It's a story of Jacob wrestling with God. It's something we can kind of get our head behind and relate to because we wrestle with so many things in our lives, don't we? We wrestle with our conscience. We wrestle with temptation. We wrestle furniture up the stairs. We wrestle with projects at work. The minister wrestles with his sermon. The students wrestle with their homework. We know what it is to wrestle in that way, and we think, well, what would it be like to wrestle with God? Now, I'm not talking about metaphoric wrestling. I'm not talking about sleepless nights and long hours of prayer. Those are certainly struggles, and I'm talking about a real wrestling match with God. Actually grabbing onto God's shoulder, trying to force God to the ground, trying to force you to the ground. What would that be like? I was thinking about that this week. I thought, well, that would be a pretty short wrestling match for me. I mean, I would imagine, like I said, with my older brothers and sisters, I was a kid, that was no contest. So what would it be like wrestling with God? Well, I would think that it would be pretty quick. Well, Jacob must have been quite an athlete. He must have had some real desire there. You remember the athletes that the newscasters say, well, he just didn't want it enough. He just didn't want it enough. That's why he didn't score that touchdown. That's why he didn't catch that ball. We've heard that before. Well, I'll tell you, Jacob wanted it. He wanted it. He wanted that blessing from God. And so he wrestles with God all night. A wrestling match that lasted all night with God. Now, okay, well, who was Jacob in the first place? For those of you who are a little rusty on your Old Testament, Jacob was one of the patriarchs. Right? There was Abraham, who had the son Isaac, who had the son Jacob. So Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. And then Jacob would go on to have 12 sons. In fact, at this point in the story, he already has all these kids. Like there's 12 sons at least. And they would grow up, and their descendants would become the tribes of Israel. So here he is. He's one of the patriarchs. If there's one thing you're going to want to remember about Jacob, one thing that kind of sets him apart from his father and his grandfather, is how much he wanted this blessing from God. How much he wanted to feel blessed by God. Now think about what that means. We don't go around blessing people a lot today. But it was a big deal then. It really should still be a big deal to us today. In fact, it really is. We just call it something different. Being blessed by God is feeling like God is on our side. God is on our team. And God's the leader. And then we're on God's team too then. It means that we are connected to God. We feel close to God. It means to feel like we have a purpose in this world. And that God cares about us. He cares about what we do. All of that is what Jacob really wanted. He wanted to feel that blessing by God, that connection to God. So in a way, he's same concerns we have. Same reasons we come to worship. Same reasons we pray, and read the Bible, we serve others, and fellowship together, is to feel closer to God. To feel blessed by God. Well, it's a great story that is part about Jacob wrestling with God because really he gets what he has always wanted. The thing that has consumed him. In fact, you remember he wanted it so much, he wanted a blessing so much, that he tricked his father by dressing up as his twin brother and getting his father's blessing. He already got that. That's how much he wanted to feel this connection to God. A lot of people say, well, he was being deceitful because he wanted all the money, he wanted all the power. Really, it turns out, just wants to feel close to God. Wants to feel like God's an important part of his life. You can't blame him for that because we feel the same way. Well, here in this part of the story, Jacob has already tried to steal birthright from his brother. Really stolen it. And he was running away because he knew his brother was really going to be mad at him. He didn't want to wrestle with him, so he ran away. And he went to a far country, and he got married, he started having kids. He's got his own little family now. Everything's working out pretty well for him, so he decides, now's the time to go back. I'm going to go back and see my brother and clear the air. This is my land too. I'm going to get that all straightened out. And he starts heading back, and he gets right to the border area. And he must sense that there's something going on because he sends his family on ahead. And interesting things happen in border areas. Yeah, that's why they call it the Twilight Zone. Because it's twilight. It's not night and it's not day. It's somewhere in the middle, somewhere on the border. And sure enough, something strange is going to happen to Jacob. He's over the twilight area. He's going to have a real Twilight Zone experience. Maybe the first one. He's going to be standing there, and this is really where the story gets strange. A man approaches. And right away, we don't hear about any prelude, any argument, any reason for it. They start wrestling. Just starting on each other, and they're wrestling and wrestling. And Jacob is so good, and he's so determined, and he's holding on so tightly to this man that the man uses a little divine power and touches his hip. And our scripture said it wrenched his hip. Another scripture readings say it didn't dislocate his hip. Imagine that pain. I don't know. I've had a stinger in my shoulder, and that hurt enough. But to have your hip dislocated, how painful that would be. And how does Jacob react to that? He hangs on even tighter. He hangs on so tight that the man finally says, it's morning. How about letting me go? Why don't we go on with our day? And Jacob said, I'm not going to let you go until you give me a blessing. Will you give me a blessing? And the man responds to him. So we start thinking, well, who is this guy? Who is this man? And why do we think, or why do we come to see him, come to believe that this is God that he's wrestling with? Well, first there's the miracle about the hip. And he does this. We also think of it as an angel wrestling, but it's also fair to say God, because we have the hip thing, and then we have the fact that Jacob senses something about him and says, this person is divine. This person is in a place to give me this blessing I've always wanted. So we have that. And then, of course, we have the blessing itself. The man ends up asking Jacob his name. He says, okay, you want a blessing? What's your name? Jacob, he says. Jacob, you're no longer going to be called that. You're going to be called Israel. And Israel means the one who struggles with God. Because you have struggled with God and man, and you have overcome. So we do think of Jacob struggling with God. And there he is. He gets his blessing. It's really a great story for Jacob at a great moment in his life. And he finally gets his things he's been striving for, and even deceiving people, trying to get, and now he has it. He has this connection to God. He has this closeness to God. He has a brand new name. And he has a sore hip. It says he limps away. That's how you go away from wrestling with God. You go away with a limp from wrestling with God. Well, given the fact that all of us here, we're gathered here in worship, we've come here for some reason. I think we have come here, I believe we have come here to feel that connection to God, to feel that kind of connection that Jacob wanted, to feel like we are blessed, to feel like we are on the same page by God, to feel like God's in a position to inspire us. So if we're wanting that, that's something we're wanting, if that's something we're seeking, let's look at this story of Jacob and see what it says to us. How do we get there? How do we go away like Jacob went away? Everything he wanted from God, feeling completely fulfilled by him, and ready then to go and cross over this border and to deal with his brother, and to deal with all the things he had to deal with. Well, what did he do and what do we have to do? Well, the first thing we notice in this story is how much Jacob wanted to be blessed. How much he wanted to be blessed, something he obsessed about, something he desired all throughout his life. Now, we can, if we so choose in our lives, keep God at arm's length. We can say, I'm comfortable with God being about right here. I really don't want God to be any closer. That's good enough for me. I want the way Jacob worked. Jacob wanted to feel God's presence in his life. He wanted that blessing. He wanted to be closer to God. So really, that's the first step. And that's something that actually some of us have the hardest time overcoming. It's just that desire to be closer to God. That desire to act more in the way God would want me to act. That desire to do the things that I'm going to need to do in order to get closer to God. Jacob had that. It wasn't a problem for him. Jacob had the desire. If we want to get closer to God, that's one thing we have to wrestle with. We have to come to terms with. Do we really want it? Do we really desire it? And once you have that, you're not going to be able to get to step number 2. And I tell you, Jacob needed it. That desire, that overpowering wish to be close to God helped him. When it finally came time to receive that blessing, it took a struggle. I mean, he had to struggle through it. It was not going to be something easy that happened. Desiring then is not enough. And that's one lesson we take from that too. Oh yeah, we got to want it, we got to need it, we got to desire it, feel the passion for it in our heart. But then finally the time comes down when we have to do something about it. We have to get busy taking those steps toward God. It's this way with all the great things in our lives. We may want a close relationship with those who are near and dear to us. We may want to feel right there with them and be like we're on the same page. We may want to really feel like teammates with those around us. Well, that takes not just desire. Then we have to do the work of it, right? We have to get down to it. We may want to get better shape in our lives. We may want to lose a few pounds. And that's great. You have the desire. But then finally, if you want to get there, you got to do the work. You got to get it done. We may want to have a great worship service here, a wonderful experience where people feel welcome, where we have all the money we need to feel supported here. We have all the active ministries that we want here at the church, changing our community and helping those around us. And it's good we desire that. It's good we want it. And then finally, of course, we have to be busy doing it. Be busy doing it. That's what Jacob did. Not only did he have the desire for it, he was willing to struggle through it. Even that intense pain wouldn't let go. He kept at it. Kept at it. And I'll tell you, this is another part maybe of desiring it. Not only did he desire it, not only did he keep at it, but he was also willing to be changed. Ultimately, that's what happened to Jacob. He was changed. He became a new person. He got a brand new name. And this is one of the promises of our faith, is that we be changed. That we be changed, that we go from being, aimless to having purpose. We go from feeling lost and alone to feeling enfolded in God's love. We go from being restless to being content. And make that list as long as you like it. The problems that we have are solved if we are willing to be changed. The Apostle Paul said it well. In fact, my dad always liked to tell this old joke. I think it's a joke, or maybe it really happened. He was in a nursery in a church, and he was being shown around the church, and he went into the nursery, and there was one verse on the wall that was hanging right over the cribs. It's actually a verse from 1 Corinthians, actual verse, and see how it fits so well with that little babies that were sleeping there, and restless there. It said, the verse from 1 Corinthians said, "We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." I told you it's an old joke. But no, think about how that fits those little babies. Think about how well, too, that fits with Jacob, too. He's not going to sleep. He is going to be changed, and so can we. We have to allow that change to occur in our lives. What a great change for Jacob. You know what Jacob means? Getting a new name? It's really good to get a new name. I mean, you think about Abram becoming Abraham, and Simon becoming Peter, the rock on which the church is built. Saul becomes Paul. Happens a lot. It's really good for Jacob. Jacob means sneaky. It means like a trickster. It means the kind of guy who will, you remember the trick in high school? You're walking down the hall, and somebody kicks your foot like that and trips you up. That's what his name meant. Imagine going through life with that handle. And now he's called Israel. Now, the one who struggles with God. And that's not a bad thing. The one who struggles with God, struggling with God. There's something to that. You gotta have the desire for the blessing. Right? You have to work for it, you have to struggle for it. And you need to be willing to be changed. Let me tell you, not only change your name, you have your life, all these things, new blessings open up for you, new possibilities open up for you. But did you notice too that Jacob went away wounded? Went away limping. Suddenly we encounter God. Suddenly when we really open our hearts to God. I'll tell you one way that we Christian folk, are wounded after coming away from an encounter with God, accepting the risen Christ into our hearts, because that's the moment when we can go from just caring about what we want, about ourselves, and what's best for us, to caring about what God cares about. And who does God care about? God cares about, worries about the lonely, the hungry, the homeless. We then come away from our experience wrestling with God, struggling with God. Not just feeling happy, not just having this great new life, not just everything's wrapped up for us and perfect, but now we have God's worries too. There are things we need to take care of, and we always will have that. Because the second we get one taken care of, 3 more are going to pop up. They're always going to be here. It's going to be like a wound that we carry. Injustices that exist in this community and in this world, and we are here to do God's work. It is a wound, it is a scar, but it is a beautiful wound to carry. To be able to know that we share the concerns of God, that we feel that close to God. Well, who would want to wrestle with God? Who would want to endure a night's worth of pain and suffering and injury that comes from it? Well, Jacob did, and so should we. Be willing to wrestle with our faith, to wrestle with God so that we can be closer to Him. We can be on the same team so that we can get a new name and a new life, and also so that we can carry the wounds that God also carries. Wrestling with God will never win that match. It's still a struggle worth having. Let's bow in prayer. Loving God, we give thanks that you give us the opportunity to care about what you care about. Dear Lord, light that flame in our heart. Help that alone to help us to feel closer to you each and every day as we keep an eye out for those who are in need. And dear Lord, help us to see what we need to do in order to accept and feel that true change in our lives. It is in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, I'll tell you, one thing I guess I felt, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's not much fun to struggle by yourself. No matter what you're struggling with. You want to struggle with the dresser up the steps, you don't want to do it alone. You want to struggle with a big project and the heat, you don't want to do it alone. But when you do it with someone else, when you do it among the community, when you do it with a group, what happens is that struggle makes you feel closer and closer to that group that you're struggling with. And that's exactly what we do here. Through the joys and the struggles, we come together as a community and a family of faith. It's one of the things, again, as I said at the beginning of our service, I am most grateful for is to have that opportunity. And if you're looking for that opportunity to get closer to this community or any other opportunity to grow in your faith, I hope you'll come see me either here during our service as I stand in back, or after the service, or any time in the week ahead by contacting me at the number in our bulletin here today. Well, friends, let us continue with our worship now. We've been talking about change and what it means to take on a new name, to be a new person. This next video describes that well. I hope that you feel as inspired by it as I have. Let's remain